July 2, 1970. That Thursday afternoon, a family of tourists took the scenic route along Lockard Gorge, Victoria. Surrounded by crashing waves and limestone cliffs, they stopped at a lookout near the cliffs. But what they found stopped them short. Just beyond the railing, fresh tire tracks led to the edge of the cliff, a sight both eerie and unsettling. And below, on a ledge, was an old white car, swaying dangerously on the rough waves. The tourists took out their binoculars to get a closer look and noticed something strange. A thick black tube was attached to the car's exhaust pipe, extending up the roof and into the driver's side window. Recognizing that the sight could be terrifying, the tourists quickly found a local police officer and returned to the scene. But it was only when they looked more closely that they saw the tube running into the cab, wedged into the driver's side window with a cloth to stop the gas escaping. It looked, rather alarmingly, like someone had intended to drive the car off the cliff. Later that evening, Victoria's Port Campbell Rescue Squad descended the cliff to investigate. The car was on the ledge, its nose smashed into the rocks, almost beyond doubt having crashed, bounced back, and miraculously avoided plunging into the ocean below. Rescuer George Grant climbed down the cliff and carefully peered inside the car, his eyes scanning the broken glass, tools, and debris scattered about. A butter knife, electrical tape, biscuits, and even a small pair of children's shoes were scattered inside. But something else caught his eye: a rifle with a single live round lodged in the clutch pedal. George called the officers above, telling them about the strange things inside. And then, amid the rubble, he found traces of blood. They pulled George up with the items to examine, recording every detail. The shattered scene told a gruesome story, one that only grew darker with each step of the investigation. A car was traced to an address 150 miles away, in the suburb of Glenroy. The police went to the home of Elmer Crawford, the owner of the car. The house was dark and quiet, in stark contrast to the picturesque suburbs surrounding it. An old caravan sat on the lawn, adding to the eerie silence. The police knocked on the door, but no one answered. When he checked the electric meter, he found it completely still, confirming that nothing was running inside. Growing increasingly concerned, the police asked the neighbors about the Crawfords. Elmer Crawford, a telephone technician, had lived here with his wife Teresa and 3 young children, Catherine, James, and Karen. But none of the neighbors had any idea where they might be. Many assumed they were on holiday. But the scene inside the house told a different story. When he broke in, he found 2 single beds in one child's room, the covers thrown back and thick blood stains on the sheets. In the parents' bedroom, more blood was on the floor. The kitchen table was covered with a half-eaten breakfast, and milk was heating up next to an empty bowl of cereal. What should have been a peaceful family home had become a crime scene. In the garage, investigators found a car seat that had been ripped off and left there. Following a faint trail of blood, they discovered a rubber tube identical to the one found dangling from the Crawfords' car. Every detail pointed to a horrifying possibility: Elmer had meticulously planned something deadly. The next morning, the rescuers returned to the cliff with new equipment to stabilize the car in case it slid into the sea. With a tractor and chains, George once again descended the cliff to investigate the back seat. What he discovered shocked everyone: 4 bodies were trapped inside the crumpled car, wrapped in blankets. They were Teresa and her 3 children, Catherine, James, and Karen. All were wearing pajamas and had been fatally beaten in the head. A hammer was also found, suggesting a brutal, premeditated attack. Investigators speculated that, unable to drive himself, Elmer may have tried to stage a suicide scene, creating a fake murder-suicide note and framing the car with exhaust pipes for grisly effect. But somehow Teresa's body was still inside, prompting detectives to reconsider everything. They suspected Elmer. Upon closer inspection, they found blood all over the car, matching Elmer's type O blood, the only blood type in his family. He had used a hose, but the rope tied to the steering wheel and the rifle on the pedals suggested he had intended to drive off the cliff while escaping alone. Meanwhile, Port Campbell police had been scouring the shoreline and surrounding bush for days, looking for any sign of Elmer. Despite extensive ground and air searches, no trace of him had turned up. As the evidence mounted, one thing became clear: Elmer had gone to extremes to stage a staged suicide, then disappeared without a trace. As the investigation deepened, every bit of evidence painted a picture of premeditated terror. Neighbors recalled Elmer's unusual behavior the week before. He made repeated trips to the dump, lit large fires in his backyard, and told neighbors he was doing a thorough cleanup to prepare his garage. He even ordered a custom-made suicide device, a rope with a homemade circuit, alligator clips, and an electrical box to stage a murder scene. The final clue lay on the family kitchen table: a newspaper clipping from a recent article about abortion and an unfinished letter from Teresa to her sister, expressing doubts about her pregnancy. Perhaps Elmer's intentions were darker and more personal, a bizarre plan to escape not only his family but also the responsibilities he felt bound him to. The mystery of Elmer Crawford soon spread internationally. As local leads dried up, detectives contacted airports, seaports, and even international police in Ireland and Canada, hoping he had contacted distant relatives. Reports of sightings began to circulate from across Australia, New Zealand, and even the remote mining regions of Western Australia, though none came to fruition. In 1973, a local man named Harry was found dead by the side of a road in regional Victoria. He looked a lot like Elmer, but DNA testing proved he wasn't him. And when a man matching Elmer's description was found with forged papers in Texas decades later, detectives again tested DNA samples, but again, they were disappointed. Today, the case remains unsolved. Investigators believe Elmer's skills as an electrician may have helped him survive in the shadows, trading jobs for cash, shunning modern technology and disappearing into the outback. It wasn't until 2008 that posters and sketches of Elmer Crawford's aged face appeared across Australia, with police offering a $100,000 reward for any credible leads. In an interview years later, a former neighbor, now an adult, recalled the quiet horror of seeing Elmer's face in the newspaper after his family was found. She recalled how they had last spoken to him and the cold look on his face as he closed the door behind him. The truth remains elusive, and Elmer Crawford's fate remains unknown. What could have driven someone to such darkness? And where does that darkness go when it disappears into the world, never to be seen again? This is the mystery of the Lockard Canyon murders, a case as cold as the cliffs and as dark as the sea below.